You are listening to Cemetery Confessions, the world's #1 goth talk podcast.
Hello and welcome back to Cemetery Confessions. This week we have special guest Gopal Metro on. I will introduce him in a second. We had quite a wide-ranging discussion. We went into the episode without any preconceived notions about what we would talk about or what we would focus on, but we ended up speaking about two main issues. We started the conversation talking about Gopal's background, and we get into elitism and gatekeeping and what that means and how that looks and how we should treat it. And then that leads into a discussion around depression and mental illness. So I feel I should put a trigger warning up here at the beginning. We are going to be talking about self-harm, suicide, and other issues around depression and other various mental issues. So I'll have timestamps in the show notes to let you know at what point in the conversation we get there, but that does come up, and we talk about it extensively. We talk about our experiences with that and how that relates to our experience within the goth community. So without further ado, let's jump into the conversation. As always, I am the Count, and I'm here with my co-host Trey. Hello, Trey.
Hello, Count.
And our very special guest this month is Gopal Metro, whom you may know as the co-founder of Bella Morte, along with other projects like Guild the Morn, Brighter Fires, and more recently, Metro Pirate Radio. So Gopal, thank you for coming on.
Thank you so much.
If you don't mind, give us a little of your backstory, your origin story, as it were, into what sort of introduced you to goth and alternative culture, and why why that resonated with you, why you've stayed with it, and then, of course, let us know where people can find your current projects and work online.
Awesome, sounds good. How deep do you want to go?
I'll let you decide. I'll cut. You know what? If I get bored, I'll cut you off. How about that?
That sounds great. All right. So back in 1733. I grew up in a very strange place. I grew up in a place called Yogaville, Virginia, and literally it's a town of people who do yoga, and it's an intentional community. Which is different from like a commune. A commune is pretty closed and self-sustained, whereas a community is open, and anybody can come and go, and it's a big mix of people. But we grew up really. I grew up really heavily influenced by Hindu culture and Buddhist culture, and there was a lot of. I mean, their folklore. I guess all folklore has some crazy stuff in it, but like. They're like, you got like Kali, and you got Shiva, who's, necklace of skulls, and all this stuff. And I grew up with these figures in my life, and I had no idea what was going on. I was just like this little kid who was hearing these cool stories, and there was this one Dina Bendu, and that a friend of the lowly, conqueror of sorrow, and that persona, that character struck a chord in me, and it was this character who spent all of their time with the outcasts, and all of their time with the lepers, and all of their time with the wizards and witches, and lived in cemeteries, and that character was I was 8 years old. I was like, that's awesome. That's really cool. And I was also super into Arthurian legends, Knights of the Round Table, like, Gawain and the Black Knight, and obviously Arthur and the Lancelot, and that whole culture, and so like knights and chivalry played a big role in my upbringing.
That's cool.
And So always had this medieval bent, always had this sort of dark bent. And when I was, I guess the first time that I heard Gothic rock, it was 87, so I was 10. and I saw the Sisters of Mercy's music video for Dominion and This Corrosion, and they were in rotation on MTV at the time. And I saw those. I was like, that is the cool. Oh, hey, can I swear?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, all right. I have a foul mouth, so just
let it spew.
Just checking. So that was the coolest shit ever. I was just like, that's awesome. And at the same time, I saw Midnight Oil's Diesel and Dust, off of Diesel and Dust, Beds Are Burning, and The Dead Heart. And those 4 music videos had like unimaginable impact on my musical taste. And I couldn't get my hands on Floodland, but I got my hands on Diesel and Dust, and I started listening to that really heavily. Then about 3 years later, I lived, like, Yogaville was out in the middle of nowhere. It was like an hour from anything in Central Virginia. And literally there, like the nearest sizable town was an hour in any direction. Like, you pick a direction and you'll hit a town if you travel an hour. So like the fact that I even knew who the Sisters of Mercy was just like a strange thing, like in and of itself. Well, I went, my sisters were in the theater troupe at the local high school, Buckingham County High. And I was there in the theater, and they were in the drama club, and I was there in the theater. And this friend of my older sister, sorry, there's so much, so much information. She was into like new wave, and she was into The Cure and Love and Rockets, and so I got like a an education, a musical education from her. But she was also like super into Wham, and like I can recite Wham Rap 86 by heart. And that's a painful confession, but it's true. And so she was influencing me in that way, and she would drill me. We would sit in the living room, and she would pull out her Walkman, and she'd say, all right, you've got 10 seconds. And she'd play a song for 10 seconds. And I had to name the artist, the name of the song, the year it was released, and the label that it was on. And so, like, I knew Wham, I knew Aha, Duran Duran, again, Love and Rockets, The Cure, like all of that stuff. Cyndi Lauper, Madonna, like all of that stuff. I could name like all the hits and a lot of the deep cuts, because she would drill me and drill me and drill me and drill me. And again, like, I'm like between like 8 and 13 years old, and she's like got me pegged down. She's like, you need to know this. I'm like, all right. So,
well, you're in luck. I've prepared a surprise pop quiz. Let's see what you remember.
So we're in this theater, and her friend Thomas Murray comes over to me, and Thomas sits down beside me. He says, listen, you need to hear this, and I think you're going to like it. In fact, I know you're going to like it. So put on the headphones. And it was like those old funky headphones, with like the foam that rotted off, and like they were super uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. And I put them on, and I hit play, and it was the track Army by Severed Heads.
Wow. Very cool.
And I fell in love. I didn't know music could sound like that. Like, it was just this whole nother world. And so I listened to that. And on the flip side was Einstürzende Neubautens, Haus der Lüge, and Halber Mensch. But the highlight tracks off of each of those. And it was a cassette that his father had made for him. I was like, this is incredible, Thomas. Like, can I please borrow this? And he gave me the tape, and I took it home and I played that thing out. Like just listening to, it was highlights from Bad Mood Guy and Come Visit the Big Bigot on one side, and then Habermensch and Haus der Lüge on the other side. And that was probably the most influential tape I ever had. And then my best friend, again, we're like 13, 14. He goes to Charlottesville, and there's this this guy who ran a radio show in Charlottesville. His name was Doc, and Doc informed my friend, and my friend brought me, anytime he got a new cassette, he brought it over. And so that was like how I learned about Crass and PIL and Skinny Puppy and Bauhaus and Joy Division and like all the classics, Exploited. And so a lot of punk rock, a lot of post-punk, a lot of goth, a lot of industrial. That was sort of the era where I was like, this is what I need to be doing. This is where I need to go with my life. Then when I was 16, I met this guy named Brahm. And at that point in time, I was like wearing a cloak and like silk, all black silk clothing, and like, silk boxers, man. I was like, yeah, and it was really comfortable. And my cloak was not like a dark black cloak. It was like this like heavy wool medieval cloak, and it was really like, it was like a dark brown, and I used it. I wore it all the time. Like I slept in it, and like I often slept out in the woods, and so like I'd curl up in the cloak and sleep in that, and it was inseparable. And so I go to the local health food store, and there's this guy there named Brahm, and Brahm and I like, my sister was like, you gotta meet this guy. And so I met him, and I was like, he looked at me and goes, so what are you into? I was like, well, I'm into a little bit of this, a little bit of that. And like, I was listening to like hip hop, and I was listening to reggae and stuff that still influences me and that I still listen to. But it was pretty broad. I listened to a lot of like world music, world beat, and just this very eclectic mix. And so I said to him, I listen to a little bit of everything. I like a bit of this and a bit of that. And he looked at me and he goes, fuck no. What are you into? What are you? And I looked at him. I was like, oh, nobody's ever really forced the point before. And I said, well, I'm a goth. And that was the moment that I defined myself as a goth. And ever since then, that's what I've been. I'm just a goth. And I have a broad range of tastes, but if I had to peg my culture, it's the goth culture. And throughout all of that, also, that yoga culture, that yogic philosophy was, I think that actually ties into a later question, but yeah, so I've been listening to gothic rock since I was 10 years old, give or take. And I defined myself as a goth when I was 16, and now I'm 41, turning 42 next week. So, yeah, so that's my story.
Yeah. You said 87. That was when I was born. So you got 9.5 years on me.
Yeah, you and I are the same age, Gopal. We're both awesome. 77. I'm August, so you're a couple months older than me, but yeah, we're about the same, and then Count's about 10 years younger.
Wait, this we get into the elitism question too. Like, yeah, guys, I'm cooler than both of you. I've been doing this so long.
Hand in your goth card, motherfucker.
That's right. 3 goth points, man.
We can just talk about that right now. I was going to mention, you said, you talked about Shiva and outcasts and that kind of thing. And that was what kept me mostly through high school. That was what kept me in Christianity at that point, because there was the emphasis on Jesus and his love for the outcast and for letting people be who they are and hanging out with, quote unquote sinners and that kind of thing. So that definitely resonated with me at the time. I didn't recognize all the problems that come along with that. But that was a big part
Not
of my...
the action, but the faith.
Yeah. Yeah.
I actually went to a beautiful Easter service this morning, but
nice.
Yeah, my father actually gave the talk.
Oh, that's very cool.
Yeah.
I messaged my dad today and my mom and said Happy Easter, because I thought that was, I don't really hang out with my parents very much, but I thought that was the polite thing to do since they're both still very devout Christians. And my dad's response was, thanks. Hey, I heard that you're a professing atheist. Do you want to email me about that and tell me why you decided to? Like, what the fuck, man? Just like chill, dude. Like, say Happy Easter and leave me alone. Like, come on. But
at least he wanted to open the dialogue.
Yeah, I guess.
I was going to say that seems like a very nice, benign outreach, but then there's all the baggage that your history
the
brings
relationship
into
with
it.
him. Yeah, that's the thing is, I maybe would have been interested in, because I know that he very much wants to try to convert me. It's less about understanding my perspective than that, and I'm just not interested in having that debate with him, because I it's not that I'm not interested in that debate. I think faith and belief and the actions that derive from those things and how people come to those beliefs are all very interesting. I just am not interested in talking with him about it, because I'm like, you know what, we don't have very much in common, so let's just be nice to each other.
I
respect that fully. That's awesome.
But yeah, well, let's talk about elitism briefly then. So because you mentioned you identify as goth, that's your primary identity, and obviously all of these things interact with each other and create the sort of perspective we have, the outlook we have, our own individual. This wouldn't be a Cemetery Confessions show if I didn't say the word ontology. So why don't you let's see, where do we want to go with this? I obviously have my own thoughts about this, but what's your perspective on either how you define goth or what problems you see with people trying to define goth?
So I'll lay it all out here. Elitism is absolute crap. Total bullshit. It's stupid. It's dumb. It doesn't make any sense. If you do it, come to the light. Like you got some badass hair. That's great. I'm so happy that you have badass hair. But having badass hair does not make you better than anybody else. It just means you got cool hair. like the number of years you've been doing this. It's great that you've been doing this long. It's so cool, But just because you've been doing it for a certain length of time doesn't make you any better than anybody else. You may have more insight and more wisdom in the scene. You may have more experience, but it doesn't make you better.
Yeah.
Like we are all equal here. Like every single one of us is equal here. Like we're all people. We're all like, that's what comes first. Well, we're all just people.
Let me, before you go on, because I know you will go on. Let me ask you two questions about that. The first is just about those two things you said. The first is, do you think there's a difference between someone? So I gave this example, like, let's say you ask someone what kind of music they're into, and they say they like Sisters of Mercy. And then you ask, just general conversation, what's your favorite Sisters album? And they say, I don't know. There's two responses there. You can be a dick and say, well, then how can you call yourself a goth? How do you not know? Blah blah blah. Or you can recommend, or you can recommend, say, oh, cool. Well, maybe you want to check this out or check that out or whatever. So so first question, is there a difference between elitism and just being an asshole? And the second question is, what was the second part of what you were saying? Fuck, I don't remember now.
Neither do I. It doesn't matter.
Well, maybe around the
editing
maybe around the being better than another person because of whatever.
Yeah. Oh, you were saying everybody's
superiority.
Equal. Everybody's equal. So my question there is there a difference between a philosophical, sort of overarching outlook of how we treat humans, and how do you address the idea of this person has been a DJ for 30 years and has been creating the scene in this small town, and there's nobody else there doing it, and this person has been goth for a couple years but never goes out to a show and doesn't do anything. Obviously I don't think in any way that means you can say one person is better than the other, but do you separate within the subculture to say this person is more of an authority on goth, or is it just like, fuck all that, we just there's no hierarchy?
So the tastemakers shape the scene. That's true. The DJs and the promoters and the leaders of the scene, they shape the quality of the scene. They are the examples. And there will always be those people who are more charismatic or more energetic or just have a greater passion for the music or whatever it happens to be. But those it doesn't make them better than. Yeah. It's just a different role. Right. That person who sits at home in their basement and throws on some Joy Division, like that's a fully valid experience. That's like and it's meaningful to them, and the person who listens to the music and enjoys it is just as it's all equally, they're just different experiences. They're just different experiences. One is not better than the other. One is not cooler than the other. It's just a different experience, just a different expression. I don't know. What was your first question?
Saying that,
I can't remember.
Being
I have
no, that's cool.
The attention span of a dribble.
So I guess sort of. Do you differentiate between someone being a dick and being an elitist, or is that just like a meaningless?
People who are dicks shouldn't be dicks. It's
okay. Fair enough.
We can. There is a psychology behind it. There's a deep psychology behind it, and generally, when you find those people who are acting like absolute assholes, those are the people who are hurting the most. And if you can figure out a way to make those people feel comfortable in their own skin, they're going to stop acting like assholes. And that's just been my experience with it. Every time I've come across it. It generally stems from some level of insecurity in who they are and what they're doing, and also some level of extreme negativity in their own life. Now, people, that's no excuse for acting like an asshole, but it is an explanation. And if you're aware of it and you can approach that person with kindness, then oftentimes it will disarm that negativity. That's been my experience with it again. But there's never a great excuse for acting like an asshole. And if somebody is coming off as an elitist, more than once in my life, I've shut that shit down.
Yeah.
Because there's no place for it.
No.
Again, it is just another experience, but I don't enjoy it.
I think that's one of the reasons I like you so much, is because you recognize that there's a lot of nuance to a lot of things, and that it's not, labels are function for what they do, but there's a lot going on with a lot of people. You mentioned someone staying in their basement listening to Joy Division. That can kind of tie in with people complaining about other people not going out, and it's like, well, you know what? Yeah, I understand, but you also don't know what people are dealing with. Like I want to talk about depression at some point and other things, and so there's a lot. We have to recognize that there's always fluidity and there's nuance and that kind of thing. I was going to ask you a different question, and I can't remember what it was now because Trey, was there anything you wanted to jump in and say there?
I guess the only a couple of points. One, there's your initial example that you started out with of you really like Joy Division, or not Joy Division, you said Sisters of Mercy, but you're a big fan of Sisters of Mercy. Then your follow-up question was around the, what's your favorite album? I think that could be getting into a generational thing, because albums aren't really things so much anymore. So if someone's a huge fan of Sisters of Mercy, but they know them from Spotify or YouTube or whatever, that they don't necessarily divide it into albums. So maybe, asking maybe your favorite track, asking maybe what's your favorite song or your favorite track is easier to digest, because someone might not know that, Alice and This Corrosion were on two different albums, but those might be their favorite two tracks.
And if they pick Vision Thing, we're going to have words. Elitism! Yeah!
But Ribbons is okay.
Ribbons is beautiful. Like when I was younger, I definitely had attitude. I thought that one album was, superior. And if you didn't listen to that album, man, you were uncool. But over time, like what you're saying, Trey, like it's just about the music and what that song means to a person. It doesn't whether it's a song or an album or whatever it happens to be, what it means to the individual. And that's the thing that counts the most, in creating space for people to express themselves and to express their love and their joy and their appreciation for this stuff without squelching it, without mocking them, without shaming them, is, it's a big thing. Like, making certain people feel included and accepted. It's not even included. It's just being accepted as an individual, accepted as a human being, whatever that means to them,
Right. It's the
same. So Go
It's
ahead.
the same conversation that we have when you get into people who are saying, well, I identify with being a goth. I'm a goth, but I can't get into the music. I just don't get the music. It doesn't appeal to me. And then there are the
Mhm.
people who will, knee jerk against that. Well, you're not a real goth. Goth's a musical subculture. And while that's
Yeah.
true, the more important thing to do, like you're saying, is get into their passions. Well, what
Yeah.
do you
Yeah.
like? What are you interested in? What about goth really gets your juices flowing? And maybe they would like some goth music, but they haven't heard the full spectrum. They've heard a handful of bands. Maybe they just don't dig Joy Division and Bauhaus, or Susie didn't
Mhm.
float their boat, but maybe they'll like Dead Can Dance. Maybe they'll like Bella Morte. Maybe
Yeah.
they'll like some other band that there's such a wide range of sounds that are accepted amongst the subculture that having that conversation instead of immediately jumping to, oh, you don't like band X, well, you can't be the real goth, is much more productive and a much better way to just engage with your fellow humans.
Yeah, it's you kind of get into that autonomic identity protection response where your reaction is to say, well, of course goth is about music. How dare you? Blah blah blah. Let me go shame you on the internet. Whereas if you take a second and think about it, like, hey, maybe we can have someone who actually really gets into goth music and enjoys it. Let me, instead of responding like that, like you said, get into their passions and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Gopal, can you tell that story of, if you remember what I'm talking about, the time you went to that goth
Yeah.
club out of state? Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I think that was really, yeah,
It was
really.
actually, it wasn't even out of state. It was just the first time I went to a goth show at all, ever. Um, uh, First off, this is something that ties back earlier. Um, uh, what goth means to me, goth is very much about the music. And the image also plays an important part of it. That's what it means to me. But that it doesn't have to be what it means to you or what it means to anybody else. And somebody who is just in it for the fashion can say, I'm a goth, and we can still have an intelligent conversation together. We can still have fun. We can go out and get ice cream together, whatever, whatever it happens to be. As long as we have that mutual respect as human beings, everything else doesn't matter. Nothing else matters. Now, going back to that story, um, I when I was getting into the scene, like there was no Hot Topic. There was no there. You didn't go to a store to buy your clothes because nobody made them. Like there was it wasn't a thing. It was like all safety pins and sewing needles and studs. You could get studs, but they were hard to find. And I bought dog chains, and created this belt of dog chains and had this brass mask and this giant ankh and like all this stuff. And I created this gear that I would wear. And it was this unique expression and it was fun and I thought it was really cool. I have no idea what it actually was, but I thought it was really cool. And, and a gear shop opened up in Richmond and we went out and I bought gear and I was like, wow, this is a place where I can actually buy stuff. And this is a bit of a modified story, version of the story, but I bought this gear and I like bought a collar and I bought some cuffs and um, we went to the show and we like this was Lycia was playing, right? And Lycia was like in all of the magazines and
Mm.
like their albums were like on the shelves and like we were super psyched to see this band. And we called the venue and we were like, hey, do we need to get advance tickets? And they were like, no, you should be fine. Like, don't worry about it. Just come. So we show up at the show and we get there early because we're expecting this long line. And we show up and there's like nobody there. And we're like, oh, we got here early enough. That's great. And we go in and there were like 6 people in the club, maybe 7 people in the club, including the 4 of us. and there's like nobody there. And we're like, what the hell is going on? And Lycia go on and there's nobody there. And like, I'm sitting there and I'm enjoying the show, but I go up to this guy. I'm like, like he's wearing this like long skirt and he's got this great makeup on. And I'm like, hey man, like, tell me about the scene. What's going on? He's like, what scene? There is no scene here. and he sneers at me and turns around and walks away.
boy.
I'm like, what the fuck was that, man? like, that's not cool. And so I go up and I try to chat this other person up, and she's like, just won't even give me the time of day. Like looks at me, looks me up and down, and then looks away. I'm like, oh my God, you're an asshole. And we go and we watch the show. And I remember feeling so downtrodden because I was like, this is a goth show and nobody shows up except for these few people who are complete jerks. And like, I don't want to be a part of this. Like, if this is what people are calling goth, fuck this. Like, I don't want to be involved in this. And I took off my store-bought collars and I threw them in the trash. I was like, I'll stick with like my DIY. Now, it turns out that the DIY wasn't the important thing. Being a nice person was. Like over the years, if you just treat people kindly, it's amazing what can happen. And it ended up, I don't think I told this part of the story, but the guy there, I ended up befriending a couple of years later. And he ended up being this really, really cool guy. He just like had an attitude, and I had to punch through the attitude, you know. And I did it just by being nice to him over and over and over again until he started feeling bad about being such a dick. He was a really cool guy. But so that's the story. Hopefully I hit on all the highlights.
No, yeah, that was good. I think it's important because we have to realize where people are coming from, where they've been, what they know, what they don't know, and you have the potential to totally ruin someone's perception of an experience of goth and just, never see that person again. Whereas, you don't know. And even just like you said, on a human level, being kind and friendly to other people, regardless of what, if they come in a full Juggalo outfit, I get it. Like we have safe spaces. We want to make sure people are being respected and people are having a good time and that kind of thing. But immediately judging someone's behavior based on how they look is probably a general bad practice.
Agreed. Fully agreed.
Any thoughts on that, Trey?
I mean, not really. I could reiterate the same sorts of things in my experience as, when I was a DJ, when I was, taking money at the door at goth clubs, and my experience of, interacting with people for the first time when they're first coming into the space, and how awkward it can be, especially if you're coming into a small scene where, everybody who's already there, who's a member of the scene, to begin with, we all know each other. We're all interacting with each other. And it can be hard to break into that as an outsider, because with a small group, I mean, there's that natural state of distrust to outsiders, and for better or for worse, we do judge based on appearances, and it's hard to avoid that snap judgment when you see somebody dressed in Tom Hardy gear, and you immediately think, oh boy, now this guy's going to be climbing up against me and just hitting on all the women and doing all this crap, and they're just going to be totally disruptive. So you don't even give them a chance to be who they are. So just trying to give that chance is probably one of the hardest things of being in a scene, because you want to both give people a chance, but you also want to preserve that safe space. Well, and you'd like to see the problems happening before they happen, but sometimes that does backfire, and you end up totally turning someone off who would have been a great addition, or maybe becomes a great addition despite that, but you totally judge them the wrong way initially.
I have a couple stories about that, but go ahead.
No, I was going to say that the other problem though is that can go both ways. That someone who looks really cool can end up getting away with all kinds of terrible shit, and that's a problem that we're still trying to deal with in the scene. So the whole this person carries my sartorial idioms, and I recognize that they're part of my thing, therefore they're okay, and this other person isn't, is just a really bad heuristic, I think, as far as making decisions on who should be there and who shouldn't.
Yeah.
What? I don't know if you want to go ahead and say whatever you wanted to say.
So in '96, I co-founded the first goth industrial club in Charlottesville, and then after what was it, in 2017, Angel and I started the second. Well, no, that's not quite true. There was another one. There are two more. that came in between. But we rebuilt the scene in 2017, and I've also seen a number of other scenes built, and for me it is built. Like, you have to have those people who go out there and say, we're going to make this happen. And those people also define the quality of the scene. They define the mode of the scene, whether it's a welcoming scene or whether it's an elitist scene, or whether it's open or whether it's closed. And Charlottesville was a small town, and when we started in 90, it was actually 95, we held the first event, Halloween of 95. Our goal was always to make certain that it was open. And to that end, whenever that new face came through the door, either Andy or I would go up there and we would greet them. And we'd say, come in, like, what's your name? What are you into? Let me introduce you to all these people. And we would get them included in the scene. And on more than one occasion, when I saw a clique forming and somebody shit talking somebody else, God, I did not stand for that. The moment I saw that happen, I would literally physically grab them by the shoulders, and I would walk them over to the person they were talking shit about. I would say, you two, you need to hang out together and sort this shit out. And that worked really, really, really well. And we ended up getting like crust punks and metalheads and rivet heads and goths and college kids, and like people from all walks of life would come to our club, and our club became the hot spot in Charlottesville. And at the peak, the venue could hold 50 head, right? That was the legal limit. And we crammed 300 people into this space. And it was just this incredible scene.
Calling the police.
Everybody got along. Oh, the police would hang out in the parking lot to listen to the music. It was awesome. It was amazing. It was in the basement of a sushi restaurant, like a high-end sushi restaurant. It was really fun, really fun. But again, like that person who you invite in and you're not certain, this kid came in and he was wearing blue jeans and a white t-shirt, and he talked with this really heavy Southern accent, and he'd go, "Hey, what's up, man? My name's Corn Dog." And we're like, "What's your name?" It's like, "Corn Dog." And we're like, "All right, Corn Dog, what are you into?" And he's like, "Well, I'm here for the music." I said, "All right, man, come on in and hang out." Corn Dog would show up and he would go to the middle of the dance floor, hold both of his hands over the air, dance the entire night going, whoop, 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 all night long. All night long, this guy would do this, right? And we were dying, like he was having so much fun. He was just like enjoying himself. And this chick who was like super goth, she came up to me and she goes, "Could you ask him to leave?" And I looked at her, I was like, "Fuck no, you go do what he's doing." like he's having way more fun than you. You're standing over in the corner not talking to anybody. And again, there's nothing wrong with that. There really is nothing wrong with that. But I'm not going to kick him out when he's having the most fun out of any person here. And he had the longest consecutive attendance of any person in that venue, including myself. He just kept coming and coming and coming and coming. So yeah. And so that guy ended up being our roadie and then became our driver and then went on to tour the world. And his first shows were in between our set and our encore. We would bring him out and he would play country music. And I remember the show in Chicago, Club Metro, playing for Scary Lady Sarah. And we're like, "Johnny, come out, you got to play." It's packed. The house is completely fucking packed, right? And we're headlining the show, and so we got Johnny out there, and Johnny goes, "Y'all like country music?" And everybody went, "Boo, no!" And Johnny goes, "Well, fuck y'all then," and kicks into this country song, and everybody went, "Yeah!" And Johnny's first fans were goths. His first following was in the goth scene, and he went on and he like got signed and like recorded these albums in Austin and like toured all over everywhere and like had this really successful music career. And it all got started with him going, "Whoop, whoop, whoop, in the club. And just again, you just don't know who these people are until you welcome them.
So
You have no idea who they're going to be until you let them in.
Great story. Let me make a couple distinctions about corn dog for everyone. Anyone who hasn't already sent me an angry email and deleted the show. I think because I love that story. I totally agree with it. I think where people get hung up is on the idea of corn dog or just, whatever example you want to use, calling themselves a goth or using the label, because Hayshaker in the chat makes the point that some people get hung up on feeling like they need to use a certain label and that they have to fit everything they like into that label. And then that's where people get upset about, like, well, no, I mean, country music isn't goth, but absolutely, if you love it and if you want to play it at a goth show, like, that sounds super fun. Just don't call it that.
Tell me Johnny Cash isn't goth. That motherfucker, like, he's been doing it well before any of us.
The Man in Black. I have,
there are all these definitions of goth over the years, and then there are all these sub definitions of goth over the years. And like, if you want to be goth and you have an idea of what that is to you, fucking do it. Like, do it and celebrate it. I'm a goth. This is amazing. Hooray. But when somebody else calls themselves goth and they're doing something different, don't shit on them. Don't treat them like hell. Like say, awesome, you're a goth too. It's a different kind of goth than what I am. That's cool. Like, that's cool, because there is room enough for all of this shit in the world. There's just room enough for all. I
agree in that. I think we should. I did not think this is what we were going to be talking about. I agree. I agree in that. I think we should give people the space they need to express themselves. I don't necessarily agree that we can open up saying goth is whatever you want it to be, because I think then it loses a meaning if it's just anything, and then we don't have the necessarily, even if it's just like a super loose definition, like you are into wearing black or whatever, it loses a sort of depth, I think, and substance for the people that have been or are involved in it. But
I've just seen it change too many times.
Yeah, it does.
Like when I got into goth, it was Sisters of Mercy, it was Bauhaus, it was Joy Division. But the people 10 years prior to me, that wasn't the case, because those bands were not identified as goth.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was art rock, and like that was Skinny Puppy's title, was art rock. Like what? From today's looking backwards, like, and then like in the late 90s and early 2000s, when like V&V, like, and Covenant, holy shit, you couldn't walk into a club without hearing oonce, 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 oonce. And everybody was calling that goth. And at the time I was like, fuck that, that's not goth. And today I look back and I'm like, oh, I guess it was. Like, yes, there was that going on. That was a part of the scene. And then the Gravers come in and like they're like doing this crazy kick foot dance thing, and like their braids are flipping everywhere. I'm like, what just happened? Like, where did the like the black T-shirt go? I've just seen it change too many times to say this is what this thing is. This is what it has to be. This is the identity. And even though recently it's been coming back to a post-punk influenced, gothic rock goth, black makeup and teased hair. That's still just one thing. It's still just one thing. And even if I disagree with what some other people call it, in 20 years, I'll look back and I'll be like, oh yeah, they were right. I don't know. That's my opinion.
Yeah, I think it might make a distinction between, because I got into goth in the 90s when it was like Funker Vogt, V&V, some Combi Christ, Covenant, like this, the big synth pop explosion. And I think there might be a difference between what was being played in goth clubs because of the scenes hanging out, and what the difference between goth is, because someone might make it the argument that, well, that post-punk stuff and the goth rock stuff was always there and people were listening to it regardless of what was actually showing up in clubs. But I will say, I think that stuff like when you get the more extremes, like the synth pop and the pastel goth and the whatever you want to point to that people loathe and say, oh, stop comparing that to goth, whatever. I do think that does, like you were saying, make changes in what even the staunchest like traditionalist goths will consider what goth is over time. And it's not the that extreme change or use of the term, but it does change sort of like, a cold wave and a dark wave. That was never considered goth 20, 30 years ago. But now I think you ask anybody and they'll say, yeah, of course, that's part of the goth genre of, umbrella of genres kind of thing. So.
Well, I wanted to bring up the potential, I guess, negative dark side of the things being called goth, whether they are or not. But when you deal with things like the Columbine effect, when some action has been labeled from the outside, oh, these are goths. This is what goth is about. And they're trying to blame, mass murder or the more recent suicide correlations with goth when we're taking negative actions, negative ideas, and they're being pinned on the goth. How does that fit in with this idea of whether it's from the outside or from the inside, taking claim of that goth label and then doing actions which potentially reflect on everybody else who also claims that label goth? And how does that modify or mitigate the desire to welcome anybody in any attitude saying, oh, you want to be goth? Cool, be goth, and we accept you, when it can have that kind of association.
Goth is very different from mental health. And all of those in order to create that kind of atrocity, you have to have some kind of, in my belief, in my opinion, there has to be some mental instability going on in order to murder somebody like that. In order to commit suicide, speaking from personal experience, in order to commit suicide, there has to be some kind of imbalance going on. There has to be some kind of something going on. Now, that is not goth, but I have seen a high concentration of it in goth, and I think for a lot of people, goth is self-medication in a way.
Well, sorry, I don't, just to interrupt. You're making a distinction between depression and potentially being suicidal and being killing people. Because you said there is a potentially a lot of that in goth, but you're saying, are you saying that there are
I'm saying
a lot of murderous goths out there?
Tons of them everywhere, every street corner. If you see a kid in black, sorry, I should have been clear.
I mean, we know what you're talking about, but it's just like, because I don't know who's listening.
That's an important distinction. That's a very
that was the late 90s
no.
idea, though. You see a kid in black and they're about to kill somebody.
Yeah. So after Marilyn Manson hit big, it was regular practice for families to cross the street when I came by. And I had spent years trying to be like cross that bridge, and then in 1 minute you get this guy who's a shock rocker coming on the scene and destroying all of that positive image, right? Now, again, is Manson goth? A lot of people think so.
A lot of people are wrong.
He never fit my image of it. Well, he never fit my image of it, but he did fit a lot of people's image of it, and people who self-identify as goth, and stepping back a minute. People who harm themselves or harm others are experiencing a great deal of pain, in my opinion, in my experience with them. That happens across all genres, all scenes, all walks of life, all social circles. This exists, right? It's part of the human condition, not part of the goth scene, right? Goths are very visible. So when something happens like this and the person resembles a goth, there's a desire to peg it on the scene. But when this happened at UVA, when the UVA student goes out and kills somebody, or when a UVA student commits suicide, it's just like, oh, that's a tragedy. They don't go, every jock out there, every member of a fraternity out there is a homicidal maniac.
Because there's a moral equivocation there, right? If you are deviant in some way, there must be some mental deviance going on, so it makes sense.
Yes, yes. Now, also in my experience, there has been a higher concentration of depression in the goth scene than in other scenes, and it took me years and years and years to say that honestly. To say, oh man, this is something that's going on. But as I said too, I believe that the scene can be. I know I'm treading on thin ice here, but it can be a physical expression of that internal darkness, a way to get that stuff out. For me, I didn't know that I had bipolar disorder until 3 years ago. I didn't know that it was a diagnosable thing. I didn't know that I had chronic depression until 3 years ago, when they said, "Hey, what you're describing is depression." But I've had it since I can remember, since I was a little kid. The need to sleep way more than everybody else. The constant feeling of being where everybody else looks happy, I sat, about 5 points below happy. My my baseline was 5 points below happy. And I started identifying with these antiheroes, and I started identifying with these, I felt this darkness in me, like this sort of, I don't know how to explain it in a way that doesn't sound super cliche and lame. But I liked depression. I liked listening to those songs that made you that was like, oh my God, somebody else feels this way. Somebody else feels this darkness. Somebody else feels this stuff that's inside me that I don't know how to deal with, how to manage. And over the years, I figured out, self-management techniques, and I used yoga, like I used meditation. I used music. I used playing live performance as a way to cope with this stuff that was going on with me. And when I was a teenager, I went through a brief period of suicidal ideation. But for me, like, I got lucky because I always knew that I wanted to live. Even if my mind was saying, "Hey, you want to die?" I was like, "No, not really. Like, no, I don't. I know for a fact I don't. No matter what you're saying, mind. Like, I know for a fact that I don't." And so I got lucky that way. But I went through that, and then right after I left Bella Morte, that was one of the shittiest periods of my life. And I was on a really negative road, and had been through some like seriously abusive situations and fucked up situations, and I had a bout there, and then recently, just a couple of years ago, I my world just went really south, and I checked myself into the hospital 3 separate times because I knew that I couldn't handle it by myself anymore. I knew that I couldn't deal with it. Now, the whole point of the story is actually not to talk about my own depression, but to talk about the fact that I'm able to see these signs in so many people around me, and recognize the value of the goth scene in managing these things, self-managing these things, and how the goth scene is like. Again, I'm just going deep. I'm diving in. People can hate me for it, whatever. The amount of people who have been abused that are in the goth scene is astronomical. It's way higher than in any other scene that I've seen, and I believe that the go ahead. This is just my experience.
Yeah. I mean, I wanted to make a decision. Well, first on the last thing you said, like, I don't know. So I think we need to first of all make a distinction between personal anecdotal experience and data across a broad sampling.
Of course.
Because, I think the standard number is 1 in 3 women are assaulted in their lifetimes, and it's higher for women of color, and even higher for trans women.
And those are just the reported
right,
cases.
Which is, yeah, exactly. And that's what I kind of wanted to get at, because there have been studies that have come out that have said there's a higher correlation of depression within the goth scene than other places. But I want to point out that doesn't necessarily mean there's, and I don't think that means there's a causal link, because It may just be, like you said, that the support system within goth and its tendency to be introspective allows for people in that community to self-diagnose more often, even though there may actually be a similar level or some disproportionate level of depression outside of the scene. It's just more readily recognizable. And because we're talking about that kind of thing in our communities, it has higher rates of at least reported,
Yes.
And another
Yes.
part with
Go ahead.
with the causal side of things, even if there is a causal relationship, I would say the arrow of causation is perhaps the main part in question. That maybe it's not being in goth that causes depression, but maybe depression
way.
could lead to being in goth, because, like you both have mentioned, it's a safe space for people who have that issue. It's a place where other people can share that. Like you
Talk
were saying,
honestly,
Gopal, exactly. Like you
Yes.
were saying, when you listen to the music, when you listen to the depressive music, that's you getting an insight to somebody else. Oh my God, I'm having this revelation that I'm not alone with these feelings. I'm not alone in this experience. There are others who share this. Let me delve into this group of others who share this experience so I can get help, so I can have people who will listen to me and understand me and help me get through this and help me function. Because obviously there are other people out there who are producing, who are creating, who are not just giving up, but they obviously have these same things. And what's their secret, and how can I find that?
Yeah, I definitely think if it comes from any of this at all, it definitely comes from the depression into the goth, or the isolation into the goth, or into the scene, into that scene. You know, when I talk about abuse, when I talk about depression, this is just based off of I've talked to a lot of people in the scene, and if you walk up to somebody and say, "Hey, tell me your story," and I'm talking about the deep story, there's almost always elements of depression, elements of abuse, elements of like these negative, really shitty things that happened in their life that led them down the road that they're on today. And goth is a healthy expression of those negative things, those negative experiences. That's been my experience speaking to people about this, because I've been fascinated about how somebody becomes a goth. What is the path that leads them to dressing out for the first time? What is the path that leads them to blacking out their eyes? Why would anybody want to black out their eyes? Right? What does that mean? What is that a symbol of? It's just, I don't know. Everybody has to look at their own life, and everybody has to figure out what led them down that road. For me, it was, experiences of negativity when I was a child, and this depression, this chronic depression that carried through my life. Now, if you'd asked me this when I was 20, I would have given you a very different answer. I would have said, goth is one of the happiest scenes you've ever seen. People are so kind, honest, open-hearted, really caring, really great people. And I still believe that there's a lot of that in the scene. But looking back on it and looking at my own life and how I ended up there, I would have said, I just got into it because I like the way it looks and I like the way the music sounds.
Yeah.
Right? But what possesses somebody to take a needle and put it through their body 42 times? And I had 42 self-done piercings. Like that was what I did. And there were reasons for that. Every time I had a traumatic experience, I said, I'm going to go out and I'm going to have a piercing. I'm going to give myself a piercing. I didn't like cutting because cutting went away. Like those scars healed for the most part. Like my scars heal really, really fast. And so I said, I want a memory of this thing. So I'd put a ring in my face and I would have a memory of a given experience. And I'd say, okay, I won't do that again in my life. And I did this, 42 times. I had 42 different piercings. And what possesses a person to do that? And for me, it was transference. Like it was very much transference. Oh, I can take this horrible, agonizing emotional pain and I can convert it into a physical pain that heals. And that worked for me for a while. It worked for quite a while. And then they just became adornments. They just became something pretty to look at. And like, tattoos have meaning, but they're also art. They're also a physical expression. So I don't know. For me, I don't know where I'm going with this. I'm starting to wander, and we're like in deep
No, it's
waters,
okay.
and there are sharks around.
Yeah, I don't. I mean, the whole thing of how does this happen is a whole separate issue. I don't necessarily think we can talk about, because it's like, my view is there's so many things happening over a period of time and different interactions going on between all sorts of things that it's really complicated to actually read into that.
At first time you see a mohawk.
Yeah. Yeah. I do want to sort of talk about the experience of depression, though, because that's at least something that I can tell my story about. I don't, is there anything you want to pick up on there, Trey, before I get into this? I actually have to pee real quick. I need like 30 seconds to do that, but I've been shotgunning beers.
Keep that in. That doesn't get edited out.
There actually isn't anything I wanted to add to it. I mean, I kind of brought it up as far as that dark side of people who are associating with goth, and how it reflects on all of us when I guess those outside the culture key on some aspect that they perceive from the outside of the culture, be it those studies about suicide rates and goth, and the fact that from the outside perspective, they seem to draw the arrow of causation from you were in goth and thus became depressed. And nobody ever seems to think about, at least again, on the outside,
you were depressed and that's why you
exactly. So that arrow of causation always seems to be going in the other direction. And like the Count said, and I think some of that is just because when something happens that's out of what's considered the ordinary, people look at other things that are out of the ordinary and say, well, this person looks weird. They dress all in black. They listen to this music that talks about death and dying and all of these sad topics, and they're frightening. And, if I, as a quote unquote normal person, went into this and I was listening to this music and I was idolizing these images, and I would start to dress in funerary garb and all of that, from my normal life, I would then think that I would start feeling more sad. I would start internalizing that, and thus that's why they believe the causation goes that way. But that's because they're coming from a different place than people who legitimately come into the goth subculture frequently. Now, it's not to say that everybody who comes into the goth subculture has struggled with something, and goth is their coping mechanism. There are, I'm sure, plenty of people, I would consider myself an example, that I've had very little in the way of terrible tragedy in my life. I have a great relationship with my family. I have very little in the way of mental disorders, but I am drawn to...
I like that you have very little in the way of mental disorders.
Nobody's free of them. Everybody has something. But, I'm not, I wouldn't be clinically diagnosed with, depression, bipolar, schizophrenia, anxiety disorders. I have, my share of issues because I'm human and I exist in this world, and this world is imperfect, and we struggle along as best we can. But I didn't come to the goth community as a way to, find other people who have shared my tragedies, my pain, my, trauma, whatever it happens to be. I came, for other reasons, and because I enjoyed the aesthetic and all of that. And there are, I'm sure, plenty of people like that too. But it is...
Yeah, to be clear, that's how I got into the scene as well. I wasn't aware I was depressed. I wasn't aware I was into I had bipolar disorder. That shit didn't come until way later in my life. I loved it because the music sounded good. It spoke to me. I loved the image. Thought it was gorgeous. Like the prettiest people, like the Damned, like Phantasmagoria. That was the most beautiful woman I'd ever seen in my life. I was like, I want to be a part of that. Like, for what that's worth. Anyway, yeah. So I did not come into it for commiseration. I came into it out of love, but ended up looking at it and realizing, hey, maybe there was something more to it when I look back on it.
I was very much one of those people that didn't really know what depression or anything was, even though I was already a goth, and that's partly because, well, I have ADHD, which is not insignificant, and some anxiety, which is not insignificant, and actually that played a big role in the early years of my marriage because we didn't understand what was happening. But I'll get to that in a second. But I was one of those people that didn't really know what mental illness was or how it manifested. I thought, if you're depressed, that just means you are in your bed a lot and you don't have motivation to do things. And I think part of that was just because even though I was a goth, I was still very much inculcated into the religion of my parents and that community and part of the Christian goth community, and that was like a whole separate subculture. But so when we had our first kid, our first kid, our only kid, don't want to jinx myself there. We my wife had postpartum depression, and neither of us knew what it was. So it was 2 years of just maybe a year and a half of just constantly arguing and saying we were getting divorced and doing blah blah blah. And I didn't know, I had ADHD. I didn't know how that manifested in myself, where I would hyper focus on a thing, and Sarah would ask me to do something and I would completely not hear anything she said, and then she would be like, why do I have to ask you again? Why aren't you participating? Blah blah blah, all that kind of stuff. And it was sort of the case of like, you get angry about these things, which I think are dumb. Why don't you get angry about these things, which I think are important? And just sort of talking past each other. And I didn't understand what all of these things that I understand now that at least she struggles with, like the active and passive suicidal ideation, which, just to make the distinction, active is basically means you have a plan or you're working towards an attempt, whereas passive is, I think, more common, or at least more pervasive. I guess those are synonyms, but essentially that you feel like you are worthless and you don't deserve to live and you wish you would die rather than trying to die. And then the other thing she really struggles with is anhedonia, which is this really pernicious condition where you basically don't feel joy in anything. And what is existence and what is experiencing life if you can't feel happiness, if you can't do a thing that connects with you on that level. It really sucks. Everything sort of feels gray. And I'm sure I'll put a trigger warning at the beginning of this episode just because we're talking about these things. But eventually that sort of passed, and then we had another major stress incident when we moved, and that was like a massive stress, and it sort of re-triggered all of those depressive symptoms that we hadn't diagnosed before. And she's now essentially diagnosed as having treatment-resistant depression because we've gone through specific number of therapies and medications and things, and it still persists. And I think, we talk about these things in the goth scene more often, but I still think there is both a stigma and not enough conversation about it. And I think the conversation is important because then people are able to recognize, oh, you know what? I actually do these things, which I didn't understand, but now I do understand them. So I can take some power from that because I understand where it's coming from and I can seek treatment. Which, treatment is so important, but there are people out there that just are going to struggle with these things for a long time. Like my wife, she goes in and out of depression, and we've been through all kinds of things. And it's you go from one moment where you're out on a date, you're having a great time, you're enjoying each other's company, and then the other extremes where you're trying to physically restrain someone so they don't hurt themselves. And they're like, I have this visceral memory of this afternoon where she was trying to hurt herself, and I was holding her, and she was just saying, why won't you let me die? I just want to die. I don't want to be here anymore. And I don't say that just to be shocking, but just because I think that for those of us who deal with those things, it's useful to know that other people also deal with those things. But I also want to lead in to say that if you're dealing with that, you do deserve love. You are enough. You are beautiful. You are important. You do matter to someone, and you matter to yourself. And the really gross, painful thing about depression is it takes that from you, and that somebody can tell you that, but it doesn't matter because you don't feel it. So I think we do need to have more compassion. We do need to be more aware of those around us. And coming back to what you were saying about the person sitting in their basement listening to Joy Division, like, we shouldn't be judging people outright for their actions without having sufficient information, because we don't know what they're dealing with, and we also don't know what our words are going to reinforce in their mind, because depression and anxiety is very irrational, and it's a constant feed of internal dialogue of telling yourself all of these negative things which are not true. And to have that validated by someone else, especially if it's someone in the scene that you're involved with, it can be absolutely devastating. So I think we need to be very careful about that. I don't know if I necessarily had a point. I just wanted to sort of tell the story of, what I've dealt with and what we've gone through, just because maybe it'll matter for somebody, I guess.
Yeah, I hear you, man. That it's incredibly hard what you've been through. And glad you guys are here.
Yeah.
You know.
And it's it's a journey, and it's something that you deal with and you go through, and it's if you are in a relationship with someone like that, with someone struggling with it, and it doesn't have to be depression, like, that's obviously the thing that I have the most experience with personally, but there are all manner of, and our depression itself articulates completely differently from person to person, right? Your experience with depression is going to be different from someone else, but if you are sort of the support system for someone, you have to remember to take care of yourself as well, because I said I have some non-insignificant issues with anxiety, but I don't struggle with anything to that degree. And realizing that I need to be compassionate and help this person that I love more than anything else, I also have to realize that I need to pay attention to what is going to keep me stable, so I don't, I can't help someone if I'm struggling, kind of thing.
So, in light of what you just said, if I said anything really terribly stupid,
no, you didn't. No.
Did triggering or ignorant, please edit it out.
No, not
I don't want to hurt anybody or mess anybody up. Because what you said is spot on. It's you never know, and it's fucking hard. Like, it's hard to do this, and it can be very difficult anyway. And yeah.
Yeah, I guess not that there's there is no one solution for everyone, but if you are having issues, obviously, like, if you need to go to the emergency room and tell them, hey, I'm suicidal, like, just do it.
Do it.
But find support systems, go to a psychiatrist if to try some medications, go to a therapist to try some different therapies. The thing to remember with this kind of thing is that it is a journey that you don't.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, some people do. Some people, like, hey, I'm taking fluoxetine and I'm fine now. But for a lot of people, it is a process, and you can't give up on it. And if you have somebody there to help you through it, even better. But it takes time and it takes work.
And also,
definitely.
And also, if you aren't suffering from that, but you know someone who is, be the person who's there for them. Be the person who can understand and to listen, and don't try to fix it. Don't try to just keep offering solutions. Just be there for them on their journey, and support them in whatever they try to do, and just make them feel like they are a worthwhile individual, and that you're there for them and you care for them.
That's very important, because I know Sarah at least can often feel, when she's depressed, completely disconnected from anything, and feel like, you know what, I don't have any friends, I don't matter, none of this matters. And just having, just saying something nice to somebody, or if you see them somewhere and you hang out and you just have a pleasant conversation, or you're just there, that can be powerful in those moments to remember the people that have been kind to you. So I think that's important. Yeah.
I'm going to be completely irreverent
Okay,
for
sure.
just a second because that's what
Yeah.
I'm good at. Not really, but there was it's an hour to the nearest town, as I said, and you drive through, and there was this clear cut land, and out in the middle, leaning against this old tree stump, was a mattress. The mattress was spray painted, black and orange, and like it looked rotten and nasty, and it had written on it and spray painted, "Nothing else mattress." Every time I drove by, I laughed. um, yeah, so that's completely irreverent. But yeah, it is, everything you guys said, like it's so important to be there and to not try and fix it. To just be there for the people, for those who need it. As I said, it took me until I was 38 years old to get diagnosed, and Angel and I were together still, and it was Thanksgiving, Thanksgiving, and she and my father come over, and they're like, "Hey, we're here to help you." I'm like, "I don't need help. What the fuck's wrong with you guys? What's
Mhm.
going on?" They're like, "No, no, for real, we think something's wrong." And I just lost my shit, like, "Fuck you both," like screaming and yelling, which is like totally unlike me. This is not like a part of what I do. And I stormed out of the house, and I just walked as far as I could into the woods,
Mm.
and I fell asleep lying next to this creek. I slept for 6 hours. And when I woke up, I was like, oh God, something is really, really
Mm.
wrong, and I can't handle it. And I went back to my parents' house, and I said, can somebody drive me to the hospital? Like, I have to go check myself into the emergency room right now. Because, the desire to kill myself was welling up really, really
Mhm.
heavily. And I went in, and they diagnosed me as bipolar, and I checked into the psych ward for a week, and started taking lithium, and they way over medicated me, and I just became a
Yeah.
zombie. And I couldn't feel, I couldn't think, everything was this cloud. And Angel felt really isolated, alienated, and alone. She couldn't handle it. She didn't know what was going on, and and I reduced my medication on my own, and it started working a little bit better, but I was still feeling really messed up. And I went back to the doctor, and I talked to the doctor, and some other shit came up in my life that was really heavy. And all of a sudden it started happening again. And I checked myself back into the hospital. And this time they gave me risperidol, and the risperidol, I had an incredibly negative reaction to it, and it made me even more suicidal.
Yeah.
And for like a whole week, I was just like sitting there rocking in a chair. Like every time I sat down, I was rocking, like, and my brain was going, "You need to die. You need to die. This is how you're gonna do it. You need to
Mhm.
die." And I was like, "This is fucking crazy." There was another part of me that was like, "You don't need to die. Like, you need to go get more help." And so I went in, and now I'm on like this crazy concoction. I'm lithium, and lamictal, and latuda, and
Yeah.
propranolol, and like this cocktail. But it works for me, and it took us a long time. It took us almost a year to get to the point where I had the mix that actually made me normal. And like, and I'm not talking about just like back to my old self. I'm talking about like, oh my God, this is how other people feel.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
this is like, you can walk around and you can be happy, and just be happy for the sake of being happy. That's like amazing. I remember the first day that I came out of it, I looked up and there was a sunset, and I was just like, this is one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen in my life. And like, everything became like, and like, I don't recommend medication for everybody, but I used to hate medication. Like, I used to say, like, man, don't touch that shit, it's poison, like, it'll, whatever. I had all this judgment and all this shit. And but now I'm like, oh my God, this actually makes a difference in my life. And the only time I have to worry is if I miss too many of my medications, because then there's like all these counter effects that happen, and you have to cycle back, and like all kinds of shit goes on. But as long as I stay on my medication, like my life is productive and it's positive, and it's like, so for me, it worked really, 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 really well. And, so I know that's not for everybody, but again, like I just wanted to share my story with that. And again, just like reaffirming that it is a journey. And this is an ongoing process. It's not something that happens overnight, but the first thing that you have to do is say, I need help, and really go and get that help, because there are a lot of people in this world who want to help you. There are a lot of people out there who are willing to put in the time and the effort that it takes to help you get back on your feet. And that's a really amazing thing. Our medical system is not perfect. Our mental health system is certainly not perfect, but there are a lot of really strong resources out there if you choose to participate. And if something doesn't work for you, don't be afraid to try something else. Like if you get a shit therapist, get another therapist. Like don't stick with somebody that's not helping you. Go find somebody else. And if a medication isn't working for you, tell your doctor, this is not working. This doesn't work. And a lot of people say they don't have the money for it, but in every city that I know of, there is a service in place to help those who don't have the money. So don't let that be an excuse for you. It's hard as shit, and it's a challenge, but there are ways. So I don't know.
God, we've talked about two things, and there's more I want to say about the second thing, but we've still got an album review to do. Yeah, I'm looking over my notes. Man, we may have to do a part 2 at some point, because I know there's plenty of things we could talk about that would be really fun to talk about. Well, this isn't necessarily fun to talk about,
like this.
But important to talk about.
Yeah, for sure. All right, well, let's switch gears and talk about the album we're reviewing, which is what is the title? Where is my thing?
Ausencia.
Yes, there we go. Ausencia by Lust Era. This is a band you may be familiar with. They're from Puerto Rico. They describe their music as raw, wiry, and dark romantic, and post-punk and synth rock based. So let's play a track from that album before we get into our reviews. I'm going to play, I think it was the second track. Yeah, I'm going to play the second track, Gotas.
I want to hear you pronounce it.
Gotas de Vidrio? That was a question?
Sure.
Gotas de Vidrio.
Yeah, we'll go with that one. All right.
La caída, y cuán terrible es vivir. Gotas de vidrio cuando lloras, es que tú eres mi eco, mi océano, haciéndome. Tu maldad y arrancándome la espina, la mermelada que me das. Caigo muriendo, lento, muerto. Perdido en tu mirada. Estrella sigue ardiendo, tu ruina me alborotaba, sigo sin despertar.
So that was one of my favorite tracks off the album. Definitely, the instrumentation on that track is banging. Like, it's so good. I also like track 3 a whole lot. It's a very different mood from the rest of the album, but I thought it was really pretty, really beautiful. And then track 5, the name. I don't know what to make of the name.
I love that one. Yeah, Slow Fat Jesus. Yeah.
but it's also a really pretty one. I again, I dig the instrumentation across the entire album. They've got such a gritty sound. It's really killer.
Yeah, those were also two of my favorite tracks. I thought, the introduction to the album, the first track it wasn't bad. It was just strange and hard to pin down, which I guess can be a good thing. It was chaotic and gritty and totally different from the second track, which we just played, which is, more or less kind of like straightforward post-punk that we could identify.
Mm-hmm.
But the opening to the album sort of gives this idea, and like you said, who knows, maybe nobody listens to albums anymore, but it sort of gave the, the thesis that this is not just a normal definable album or band. We're going to try and do something interesting and do stuff that we're into, which I think is cool. I think my favorite track though was the third one. And then, well, just because that was very sort of dreamy and atmospheric, kind of similar to Drab Majesty, I think, which also just came out with a new album. But I'm really into that.
Cool.
Yeah, it's either they're coming out with it or it's in pre-orders, something like that.
They put on a great show.
Oh, have you seen? Yeah, I still haven't seen them yet.
Yeah, we DJ'd. Angel and I did a tag team DJ set for their show in
Nice.
Richmond.
Yeah, and he just came out with a new band too as well. But there's so much
cool.
There's so much good music coming out now. It's insane.
It's so insane. It's amazing. I love it. We're in such a good time for music.
Yeah, absolutely. So that slow fat. I love that title, Slow Fat Jesus. So that's also a great track. But yeah, I mean, overall, I really enjoyed this. It's enough weird that people who are into weird stuff will enjoy it, and enough sort of recognizable goth music for people that are into that scene to enjoy it, which I think is good because you get a balance there. You get a mix of people, and that can open up doors to people getting into other things. So what did you think about it, Trey?
So when I first listened to it, I didn't listen to it a whole bunch. So I only listened to it once or twice, and I was kind of running through the tracks right now as well, just to refresh my memory. Got off on the wrong foot with the first track, just because it was too punk for my tastes in general. So I didn't enjoy the first track. So I was like, oh boy, it's going to be a straight up punk album. And while I like some punk, I'm picky around punk, so it didn't really grab me. But then the rest of the album just kind of migrated away from that. It slowly backed away from the sort of straight up punk side of that first track. The second one was moving more towards the, like you were saying, the post-punk / goth rock sound, breaking away from some of the limitations as far as musical limitations that punk and the sort of classic traditionalist style of music that punk engenders, moving away from that into a little bit more of an experimental realm. So I did enjoy the second track, and I definitely started really getting into it with the third track and into the fourth and the fifth. I liked that it started moving into a little bit more of that sort of ethereal area, a little bit into the chill area, and it seemed to have that ambiance of darkness without the aggression that I definitely gravitate to personally much more. So overall, I mean, I really did enjoy the album. I don't know what my favorite track. It's somewhere in the 3, 4, 5 range, probably 3 or 4. As much as I like Slow Fat Jesus, it is more of an instrumental, and I like the more structured songs of the previous 2 tracks. But I did really enjoy that sort of ambiance of the instrumental track of track 5. So yeah, I did enjoy it. I didn't, despite being kind of turned off by the very first track, it turned me around as I listened to it throughout the rest of the album. And overall, I did enjoy it. I'd probably give it I'd say probably 4 out of 5.
Oh, I forgot about that. Yeah, I'd also. Yeah. 4 out of 5 sounds right to me.
I'm all in on that.
So, all right. Well, let's wrap up with our Sinister Suggestions.
So you've got to be interested in death. It's the last great taboo. It's the only taboo left.
Precisely. I mean, why is it, do you think, that everyone in here is dressed in black? It's a celebration of death.
No, I just like the clothes.
Yeah, well, no, I mean, the clothes look good. Yeah, I mean, death looks good. Charles Manson, yeah? No, he was cool.
Don't know if I mentioned it before, but I'm actually a vampire.
Sinister Suggestions.
So, for those who don't know, Sinister Suggestions is when we recommend something we've been listening to, watching, reading, enjoying for the last month or so, and that we think is useful or fun or enjoyable, and we recommend it. So, Gopal, you're the guest. Do you have anything to recommend?
I'm sure somebody else has beat me to this, but Love, Death, and Robots.
Oh,
Is
yes.
so good.
Yes.
Absolutely loved that. Binge watched that. Because of course, but Game of Thrones. Like I'm just sharing what I've been doing. Yeah. So Game of Thrones. And then literally what I've been doing for the past, like, I don't even know how long, is PlayStation VR. I've been playing Beat Saber nonstop. Beat Saber. Well, let's see. Beat Saber, Super Hot, and
Super Hot,
Spark.
yeah.
Super Hot. Oh gosh, it's so fun. It's so insanely fun. And I am so sorry. I've been playing Spark. Do you know what Spark is? Spark is an e-sport. So you actually go online and you run in leagues, and like there's well, this is the first time that I've ever played a sport that I was like, this is great. I'm like, I'm in Tron. Like,
okay, all right.
It's amazing. It's amazing, and I am so sore from it. We played Beat Saber for probably 5 hours today, and I had some friends over, and then. So yeah, PlayStation VR, the Star Wars mission, and like virtually, if you haven't done it yet, find somebody who owns one and go and play, because it's a whole different thing. It's like a completely different experience, and Beat Saber anybody can enjoy. Anybody who can play VR can enjoy. So that's what I've been doing.
And
Sinister, dark,
death. Pro tip: if you have a PlayStation but not VR, it is possible. Well, depending on where you're at, we have occasionally borrowed VR. As a motorcycle goes by, borrowed VR from our library, so you may have that option.
Dude, that's awesome.
Make sure you wipe it down, though. You don't want to get pink eye.
Yes. Yes. You get so sweaty.
Yes, you do. Trey, what do you got?
All right. Well, the main thing I have that I've been, I guess, reading this week, I already mentioned it to you, Count, but I've been getting into it more. It's a fan fiction. It's called Harry Potter and the Methods of Rationality. And it was sort of a serialized retelling of the first book, except as they're I'm going to read off the Wikipedia page here, but it says basically, unlike J.K. Rowling's original books, in which the orphaned Harry Potter is raised by the abusive Dursley family, Harry Potter and the Methods of Rationality's Harry's Aunt Petunia marries Oxford University professor Michael Verres Evans, and Harry is homeschooled by his parents in science and rational thinking before learning about magic and traveling to the wizarding school Hogwarts. At Hogwarts, the alternative universe, Harry first attempts to apply the scientific method to the study of magic. And then it kind of goes totally off script for the rest of the regular story, and it deals with some of the politics of the wizarding world, and different house membership, conversations about psychology and belonging, and it's really very well done. I'm listening to a podcast version, which is kind of, I guess, community theater acted out. It's actually relatively well done, as far as different people speaking to different characters in the book. I've been enjoying it. I think it's really entertaining. So yeah, that's kind of my sinister suggestion.
Yes, send me that information too.
Will do.
I can't speak. Information too.
Will
Yeah,
do.
that sounds really fun.
I have a couple more music suggestions for everybody. I'm trying to do this every month. I've got 2 bands for you. The first is called Evie or Evie Vine. Not necessarily like immediately straight up like dark goth or anything, but it's very much more like laid back, sort of grungy. Like think of the soundtrack to Only Lovers Left Alive. Add in some like doom metal and some more ethereal sounds, and that's pretty close. Pretty cool. Their current album is Black, Light, White, Dark is the name of it. I'll have a link to their Bandcamp. And then the other band I was going to suggest is a band called The Ire, which is a black female fronted, more straightforward post-punk goth rock kind of band. Really, really good. I haven't seen too many people talking about it. I think Angel mentioned they played Goth Night with somebody.
The Ire played Goth
I
Night?
think so. Or they are playing.
Just did.
Yeah,
just did like last week.
Yeah. So very cool. That's very cool. Really good band. Another like one of these, I guess, more obscure, lesser known sort of goth post-punk bands that we're seeing a resurgence of. So I would definitely recommend checking them out.
Yeah, I think they're Virginia based.
Looks like Pennsylvania, if their Bandcamp, if I'm on the right
Pennsylvania, okay.
Bandcamp at least.
Yes, the Bandcamp. Yeah, Pennsylvania.
That's
Philadelphia.
That's it.
Born and raised. Not gonna.
Okay, go on the whole song.
So that's my sinister suggestion. But of course, the most important. Go ahead.
I have two also.
Oh, you got more? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So music wise, this is not new, but Ivor, EIVOR, beautiful stuff. And then Nightland, NYTTLAND. Definitely check them out. One of my favorites right now.
NYTTLEND.
LAND.
Okay.
Nightland.
Cool. Yeah, there it is.
Oh, and Ayatoya too. She's out on tour right now. IYATOYAH.
Ooh, Nightland is dark, epic, folk, Nordic, Siberian. That sounds pretty neat. I love all that, all the cool pagan like
There's
drum
so
stuff.
much right now. There's so much coming out. Again, it's just like such a good time to like
be a music fan.
So for music, to be a music fan, it's so good.
But yeah, of course, the most important suggestion is to go to Gopal's Patreon page. Why don't you tell us a little about that? What you got over there and what's going on?
So in my career, I've stepped back a whole lot, and I am focusing on just a very small group of people, and I am releasing music specifically for those people. And if you're interested in that, you can go to patreon.com/GopalMetro. And every month I produce one new song and I release one song from my vault, which has like all demos and then old recordings from let's see, Ideal and early Bella Morte and my early solo work and all kinds of stuff. I can't remember what else we've got on there right now. My early death rock band, Undergrave. And then also you support, if you sign up on Patreon, you support Metro Pirate Radio. So that's one show every Wednesday night, 4 shows per month. Sometimes I have guests. Sometimes it's just a bunch of us sitting around hanging out and me doing stupid shit to entertain people, like read horrible facts for an hour and a half straight. That was last week. A bunch of stupid facts. It was great.
Metro Pirate Radio is fantastic. If you go, I would recommend everybody go like the page. That's why I'm on Patreon on your Patreon to support that. But if you go like the page, you'll see when he goes live, and it is a hoot and a half. Well, I'll say it that way. It's a lot of fun.
So I'll take the compliment about Metro Pirate Radio, but man, you don't like my music?
No, I do. Okay. That was why I first joined your Patreon. And then I was like,
Thank you.
I was like, oh, hey, your music's actually really good too. There we go.
Oh, well, thank you so much. I wasn't fishing for compliments at all.
Gopal, thank you for hanging out. It's really been a pleasure to have you on, and I appreciate you telling us some stories.
It's been a joy to be here. Yeah, thank you both so much. And one day I will get you on Metro Pirate Radio.
One day. In a world.
Maybe.
Yeah, this has definitely been a lot of fun. Thank you for being on.
Trey, pleasure
you
meeting
as well.
In 2 weeks, we will be back with a brand new episode. We're going to be continuing our special sort of sub-series of episodes where we have an expert panel of guests on the show to discuss some of the more serious issues facing the scene. We will have a panel of musicians, DJs, authors, and scenesters of all different age ranges to discuss race. We're going to be talking about the experience of Black goths and people of color within the goth scene and without the goth scene, and what that sort of means from a social perspective, from a music perspective, from a local and online perspective. We'll be going over a whole range of topics as they pertain to being Black and being non-white within American culture and within goth culture. So it's going to be a very powerful episode and meaningful, I think, content. If you want to get access to that early, you can head over to our Patreon page at patreon.com/cemeteryconfessions. If you would like to support the show or get bonus content, for example, the 2 episodes coming out this month, those live streams have been available for about a month before they went live. Same will be for the next episodes. You can get access to the full edited show at least a week before release for just $1. You also get access to our Discord server, which is fantastic for anyone looking to get connected with other goths if you don't have a local scene. Very laid back, very friendly, very helpful community there. I'm really proud of the people who have decided to participate in the Discord and the really kind and meaningful community that they've developed there. But you can also get access to merch and all kinds of other things that you don't get as a patron, that you don't get without being a patron. So let's mention who our Patreon members are. At the founders level, we have Daniel, SJ, Esmeralda, Abigail, Stella, Taya, Samantha, and Christine. Thank you all for continuing to be the cornerstone of the podcast, keeping us going and online. And we have some more beautiful people at the Nocturnal Council level. Kyra, Dawn, Jason of Junkyard Bat on Etsy, Christina, we've got Esther, Sav, Hayshaker, Natalie, Michelle of Skullgirdle on YouTube, DJ Azzy of Obscura Undead. Her and Mouse actually just published the first video episode of Obscura Undead, which was really cool. They spent about 20 minutes talking about new releases and scene happenings. So if you're looking for new goth music, definitely check that out. Michelle, Thomas, Cadaver Kelly of YouTube as well, Trey of this podcast, Amber, Fifth Dream, Nephilim Incorruptus, also on YouTube, another YouTuber, Eternal Winter. Congratulations on your engagement and soon-to-be marriage. Amy, Mike Mess of the band, and William. Thank you all so much for supporting the show. And then at the Crow's Call level, we have Dave of the Goth subreddit. They also have a Discord, Gothy Discord, so you can go check that out. Free to join, that one is. Isabel, Kevin, Top Down Tom, Sarah, Morgan, David, Jen, Ritual 83, Irene, Barnabas, Abby, Jonathan, Becca, Kelly, Dom, Michelle, King Rhinex, Marco, Alex DeWinter, who you can find on Instagram, Eduardo, Dark Goth Fairy, Jan, Jason, Neon Sigain, band that we have reviewed in the past, who you can also find on Bandcamp. They're coming out with some new music pretty soon as well, so get on that. Stuart, Isabel, Margarita, Marissa, Jamie, Kimberly, Alex Kennedy of the We Have a Technical podcast, podcast I sing the praises of very often. You should all be checking that out. Richard, Mr. Polar Bear, Dagger Dance, Caroline of Caroline Sometimes, Elenia, GPS, Bronwyn, David, Country Fried Goth, who you can also find on YouTube under that name, Mark, Gandalis, Angel, Anne, Heather, Laurel, Christopher, who has been also writing for Obscura Undead, Wolfie, Kelly, Ryan, Gopal Metro of, well, this podcast, Susan, Kay, Beth, and Cher. Thank you all so much, so much. I cannot overstate how much you are the lifeblood of this show. If I missed out on one of your projects, please message me so I don't do that in the future. And again, you can join Patreon starting at just $1 a month by going to patreon.com/cemetery confessions. Thank you again, as always, so much for spending time with us. It really means a lot. We'll be back again in a couple weeks. I look forward to spending more time with you. Thank you for listening, and until next time, stay dark.
The preceding program is a member of The Belfry, a network of blogs, podcasts, and videos for the darkly inclined. Go to thebelfry.rip for more information.